I'm part of the United States Army Special Forces, the Green Berets, and I have been for several years now. During my tenure, I've deployed multiple times to Afghanistan, Iraq, and for a few months in Syria, as well as to several African countries. I've been to all 4 corners of the globe, and I've seen my fair share of the good, the bad, and the ugly that comes with being a part of SOCOM. I've got plenty of stories, some more interesting than others, but almost all of them are heavily classified, behind red tape that will never be declassified until I'm dead and gone. However, there was an incident a few nights ago that stuck out from all the others, mostly because, unlike all of the other operations that took us to a combat zone across the distant hemisphere, this one happened right at home in our own backyard, and the enemies weren't a foreign proxy or a group of insurgents, it wasn't even human. The stuff from that night is still weird, and it's not like Command is going to give us any answers. It's the reason that I'm bypassing everything that I've been told, disregarding and putting my butt on the line. Even if I use false information and withhold names, plenty of innocent people have died, as you'll find out. An upper command would sooner bury it than acknowledge their deaths and give their families closure. I don't have all the answers to what happened in that Western Tennessee National Park, but I do have enough to let people know the truth, the semi-truth anyways. For safety and privacy purposes, like I stated previously, I'm withholding a lot of personal information such as names, exact locations, and unit information. I'm referring to smaller stuff that I don't think even the scary 3-letter groups could really trace, even if they cared. I hope they don't. Like I said, I'm part of a SOCOM Green Beret team. You all know who the Green Berets are, you should. My team is nicknamed Raider, a general theme in our company naming things after warrior culture. Raider, Artemis, Barbarian, Centurion, etc. We're a 10-man element, the team lead, a way too salty Georgian captain, with a warrant officer, a medic, a comm sergeant, and 6 weapon sergeants. Our captain decided this way was best considering we're all in one piece after our last mission, and he was right. Our weekend was calm and boring as we got rotated on QRF, Quick Reaction Force, for the month. QRF means that if someone, somewhere, needs the green-eyed boogeyman of the Western world, we were ready to kit up and be there at a moment's notice. It just so happened right when some of us were getting ready to head to the bar and have our 2 singular authorised beers of QRF a month, we were called in. When we raced back to our cop and got our stuff ready, the captain came with some surprising information. We'd probably be able to make it back for those beers because we were heading to West Tennessee of all places. We didn't know what the status was yet. Command hadn't given us any information. What the OPFOR was, what weapons they had, what the layout of the area was, nothing. But being the QRF team, Raider still kitted up, and we were at the HLZ in less than 20 minutes. While we waited for our transport, the captain finally got some information. Apparently, a facility in the middle of uninhabited, restricted woods of a national park had activated a distress signal. The woods it was situated in was a large national park in, like I said, Western Tennessee, with a long history of disappearances on its now frequently closed and blocked off trails and campsites. This raised a few questions. What was the facility? Why was it in a national park? What happened that necessitated rolling out the angriest Green Beret team this side of the East Coast to act as its backup? Why were we going there when in an hour somebody in Libya or somewhere across Eurasia might need us to back them up? The captain acknowledged all of these questions, but assured us that that was all he knew. He's been with our team for years now, with several deployments to the box and back, and he's always been straight with us. It's how we knew that he was lying. Our transport finally arrived. 160th SAW Night Stalkers, an AV unit that's been around for nearly 40 years, having dragged every single kind of SOCOM unit to every single part of the world. We expected the Black Hawk they brought, but the armed escort of 2 birds that came with them was a surprise. I mean, we were in domestic America. We were going to Tennessee. Why were they here? Even with the Night Stalkers flying at top speeds across several states, it still took us a couple of hours to reach our landing point. The inside of that bird going full throttle was deafening, even with the electronic headsets we were sporting. It was ear-splitting, and yet while sitting next to the captain, I could tell that he was speaking to someone on a different frequency. This was off because normally he would go to the comm sergeant and use the radio, but he had a side channel filled in his radio talking to someone, writing down incoming information. I was able to peek over and saw some of the things he was writing. Mascal, close quarters, out 4, no blue 4. For example, the birds touched down in the middle of an empty parking lot outside the local ranger station. We filed out into the open area, the birds took off, and the captain chimed in on our team network. "Raider Romero, this is Raider Lead. Get on the net and have them hold orbit in case we need close air. Break." He then broke transmission and talked to us all. "Raiders, hold outside and take up security. I'm going to get the Ragnar. Prepare for a hasty ramp brief. I just got more information." We all took positions behind some of the parked vehicles the Rangers would use. Just to clear things up, our team was outfitted with GPN VGs, also known as quad nods, 4-barreled night vision optics that provide an almost daytime-like view of our surroundings. Couple that with our packs mounted on our rifles, allowing us to see and shoot anything at night. As the military says, we own the night. The tree line in front of us was lit up like an operator rave party as the captain walked back, nods on, with the ranger currently on shift following him. He keyed into our net and we could hear him through our headsets. "All Raiders, this is Lead. New information states that the facility has suffered a mass cal. Break. Mass cal means mass casualties. Enemy Op-4 unidentified. However, the outgoing net during the distress call indicates that Op-4 is extremely dangerous and engage at close range. Break. There is no Blue 4 on site. I repeat, Main has stated there is no Blue 4 on site, and we are to drop any and all packs that we see." A few seconds passed as the captain looked back to the park ranger, who made additional comments. Ranger Clemens, the man maybe in his mid-40s, balding, scratched the back of his neck, clearing his throat before speaking. "I heard a lot of gunfire coming from down there, and don't split up. Whatever you do in these woods, don't split up." Our medic laughed. "Well, ain't that comforting?" The captain nodded to the man as he headed back in. "Everyone, watch your 6s, 12s and 5s, let's go." We picked up and moved out. Everybody had their final moments, a type of readiness drill that they did before stepping onto the path into the woods. Same stuff that we did before stepping out of the fobs and compounds back east. I let out one final breath of hot air in the cold. Our medic slapped the side of his helmet, hyping himself up. The captain pulled out and kissed a small crucifix necklace from underneath his combat shirt. We headed down the pathway, following the captain in a staggered column. Our IR lasers scanned the trees, rocks and foliage around us, looking desperately for any hostiles that lurked in the darkness. Despite our paranoid readiness, nothing appeared, but something was definitely following us. When we moved through forest environments, you listen to the animals around you, the crickets, the birds, the movement of animals and what direction they're heading and how fast. Moving down that path, though, we couldn't hear a thing. It's common when you're a group of heavily armed green men moving through a forest at night that some of the squirrels and birds will run the hell away, but not the crickets or the bird songs in the distance. There's a certain level of ambience that animals will maintain even if they detect humans around. There was none of that. Nothing. Not a cricket, a bird, a cicada, nothing. Silent professionals, MS in our name, so when I could hear the guy, 10 meters ahead of me breathing as we moved through that dead forest, it told me that something else was here in these woods with us, a predator, and that the forest was more afraid of it than us. After a long stretch of marching down the trail, the captain held up a hand, signalling a halt. As I got down to my part of the column, the middle section, he called over the radio. "This is Lead, on me, time now." We quickly rushed out to what we saw was a metal chain-link fence. 4 of our weapons sergeants and the medic took up security, covering the woodline behind us as I and the other remaining one went up to the gate with the captain. The park's trail carried on for a few more meters before stopping dead into some trees. The dirt path broke off and formed a gravel one that led into a sectioned-off area behind a chain-link fence and gate. A no trespassing sign hung high, and just beyond the gate we could see a small guard shack. The captain tried to signal whoever might be in there by switching on the surefire tack light on his rifle, shining it and waving it all over the booth. However, upon stopping and centering on a doorway, we saw a large amount of blood splashed on the back wall and pooled over the floor, with an arm laying halfway out of the doorframe. The captain looked to the other weapons sergeant with us. "Get your kit." He nodded, slinging his rifle as he dropped his assault pack and dug out a small pair of bolt cutters. Each of our weapons sergeants carried a different loadout depending on what we needed. One could be a gunner, another a grenadier. Can't name him, but Breachman, as I guess I'll call him, always carried a breach kit just in case. He walked over to the lock, but just as he got the blades of the cutter on the lock, we heard it. It sounded like it came from everywhere and yet far away at the same time. Maybe it was the echo of the forest, or maybe something attributed to its abilities. It sounded like a woman yelling in pain and agony, yet the voice was half gargled, like it was morphed with that of a dying animal, as it had an underlying low-tone pitch beneath it. It got under the skin of everyone. Those pulling security immediately jumped, scanning left, right, up, and down. Hell, even the medic, a big stocky dude who grew up in Brooklyn and played football before he joined, meaning he was yoked as all hell when he got to the unit. The guy who once stuck his fingers into a man's neck to plug his blood, even he looked around nervously. What the hell was that? Our weapons sergeant with the M46 shook his head as he scanned the far-off terrain, muttering in a low voice, "Some horror movie crap right now." I remember holding my rifle's grip tight. Everyone was equally unnerved. Everyone except the captain. He just told us to press on. "Come on, tighten your jockstrap, let's go." He snapped the lock off. Immediately the captain and I moved in and cleared the small booth as 2 more weapons sergeants and our medic took up covering positions down the gravel road. Inside the booth, we found a guard, no name tape or company logo, decked out in a black plate carrier. The plate carrier had been torn into, with a large hole covering the entire area of his solar plexus, now fragmented and broken inside his mulched upper body. There were no bullet entry or exit wounds, just a large stab wound that looked like he got run through by a lamppost. My breath caught in my throat as I grunted to clear it. The captain stepped out of the small booth, spitting hard into the grass and shaking his head. The medic prodded him. "What was it like?" he grunted, walking to the front of our formation. "Doesn't matter, Doc." We formed up and moved down the gravel road in a wedge column. The captain and 3 weapons sergeants were in the front wedge, with the medic, me, and the other 2 weapons sergeants in the back, and the comm sergeant in the middle. We entered the facility lot and immediately the comm sergeant linked up with the captain. I could hear him alerting Maine. "This is Raider Lead. We've reached the building." Though it makes me wonder if he used the comm sergeant's radio to reach our HQ. Who was he talking to on that other channel? The lot was clear, and we got a good look at the facility. It was a grey concrete rectangle, maybe the size of a small gas station. Floodlights mounted on the bottom illuminated the gravel lot up to the dense, shadowy woodline that lay just beyond the chain-link fence. The woodline was still quiet. The carnage we were told about was present outside of the building. Several guards, all in various states of mutilation similar to the gate guard, were strewn about the gravel lot. However, unlike the gate guard, they were in heavier body armour with rifles capable of going automatic, and spent brass was everywhere. Some of the other guys and I got online and cleared out the back. Exasperated breaths and muttering came from all of us. The captain chimed in. "Raiders, on me, time now." We hauled it back to him as we stacked up at the door. Flowing in, we were greeted by a lobby torn up, furniture thrown everywhere, and impact marks from rounds hitting the concrete lined the walls and ceiling. One dead guard slumped against a red-stained part of the wall, another in a crumpled heap. A woman at the desk, not a guard but just a staff member, sat back in her chair, her entire torso torn apart. As we passed by her and headed through the double doors behind her, her empty dead eyes met mine. The comm sergeant eyed her as we all moved through the door. "Sir, she was unarmed." "I can see that. Keep chatter to a minimum." We cleared through the double doors to be greeted by a porcelain hallway leading into a set of stairs heading to a sub-level. The entire surface, ceiling, walls, floor, was lined with ceramic white tiles, which, like the rest of the scene so far, was stained with the blood, guts, and even brain matter of the unlucky guards laid out all the way down the stairs. I counted 8, 17 so far. A flickering light could be seen through the wire glass windows and the double doors at the bottom. The captain ordered us to flow in through both sides, and we did. Pushing in, we could see that we had entered into a T-style hallway. It gets a bit complicated here. Either end of the T ended, while the middle one shot forward far down into a hall leading to 2 reinforced blast doors at the very end. 2 immediate labs on either side were reinforced with more wire glass, and despite several cracks, impact marks, bullet holes, and even holes made in the glass, they remained intact. "This shit can't be ballistic glass," our comm sergeant muttered. "Why didn't they just take cover in here?" the medic said. The captain sighed. "Seems to be pointing to a surprise attack from the inside, emphasis on surprise." The medic fired back. "Well sure, but it's just a door." While the hallways outside were a mess of blood, guards thrown around as they were ripped apart, creating a mess of bodies, weapons and more spent brass, The lab techs had their white coats stained with their own blood. My blood and, I think, everybody else's started to run cold as the pieces came together. Whatever had killed them did so indiscriminately. We formed a rolling T, heading down the hallway. I was on the right, with the gunner taking centre and another guy on the left. The captain pushed forward, leading us from behind. The windowed labs ended halfway, with 2 solid white doors near the double doors at the end on either side leading to closed-off labs. The captain had us pull guard on both of the side doors as the gunner aimed back down the hallway. Everyone else took up security wherever it was needed. The captain eyed the door, feeling the cracks and lines of the blast doors, looking for gaps that didn't exist. Blood slowly leaked out from the bottom, causing him to pick up his boot and eye it, and yet no openings existed. An electronic pad was positioned on the right side of the doors. The captain eyed it. It was a hand scanner, and I didn't even think those actually existed. He jumped on that private frequency that I keep mentioning. I'm at the doors. Yeah, at the far end there's a hand scanner. He waited a few seconds of deafening silence and made an internal chuckle as he walked over to the dead body of a guard kicking its arm. I got one right here. I'm sorry. Repeat last. Alive. He rubbed his face, cursing under his breath. Shit. He shook his head, turning on the white light of his rifle and scanning the corpses. This place is a slaughterhouse. How am I going to... A crash emanated from the white lab door to the right of the blast door, the one that I was covering. Everybody paused for a second as a second weapon sergeant aimed his laser at it. The captain turned, aiming his laser at the door as he approached. Might have one. Might have Op 4 actual. Wait one. Over. The captain formed up as the first man in the stack. An unusual practice, but everybody else fell behind. I was the second man, and 2 more made third and fourth. A weapon sergeant felt the edges of the door and then tried the handle. Locked. Him trying the handle must have alerted whatever was inside because a voice bellowed out. I'm in here. Please, I'll let you in. Just don't shoot. The doorman looked to the captain, who nodded. Might have bloofer inside. Stay sharp. Wait on me to fire. There wasn't supposed to be any bloofer on site. The door's electronic lock opened, and the doorman grabbed the handle and pulled it open. As the 4 of us entered the room, we pushed through. The captain hooked left, I pushed forward, the other 2 followed one of us respectively. Our lasers centered in the room, and a pair of hands emerged from behind the lab table. Please, the voice weakly shouted. The captain stormed over. Hands now! I'll shoot you, I swear to God, if you don't put your hands up. As the person stood up, we saw the hands were connected to a scientist, possibly late 30s, with stringy hair and circular glasses. Glasses that flew off when the captain closed the distance, shoving him against a metal cabinet, spittle flying from the bearded mouth beneath the night vision goggles as he barked. ID! Where is it? Show it! The captain began roughly searching the lab tech. As he pulled out his ID, he grabbed it, shoving him to the weapon sergeant on his side of the room. The lab tech was kicked down to his knees. The captain jumped back on that frequency. I'm back. Possible blue 4. Prepare for ID code. He read it off in phonetics before he got the response. He looked to the weapon sergeant guarding the lab tech. Get him up. Please, I don't know what's going on. I was just running some chemical tests. We've got to get out of here before... The captain got in the man's face. Shut up, he did. You know what you've been doing. I know what you've been doing out here. Open the doors right now. The man was shocked as the captain continued. Open the doors now. With a point from the captain, the weapon sergeant shoved the man forward into the door frame. The man crumpled a little bit as the captain laughed. Oh, take your sweet time, Doctor, let's go. I picked him up by his shirt collar and dragged him over to the blast doors. The captain pushed him out of my grip, shoving his face first into the doors. Hand on the scanner now. As the captain grabbed the man by his wrist, the lab tech struggled to get free. Please, I don't have that access. I hurt my hand trying to hide. Let me go. The medic winced at the sight, uncharacteristically for a Green Beret, especially for a jaded-as-hell medic. He spoke up. Cap, come on. The captain just turned, staring daggers into the man as he wrestled for the man's wrist. Just wait till you'll see. I'm telling you. As the man struggled against the captain, the weapon sergeant came up from behind, shoving the man into the blast door, allowing the captain to easily place his hand on the scanner. The scanner lit up a bright blue as several lines traced and looked over his handprint, then flashed green as the electronic locks of the blast doors began to open up. The captain dropped the man. Well, good gracious, what do you know? The door slowly pulled open. The room was dark with red flashing emergency lights illuminating the space. The sound of broken glass scraped against the door. A stream of murky blue liquid mixed with the blood of several guards' bodies leaked out into the hall. The captain grabbed the lab tech by the collar, dragging him to his feet. "You'll know these men, Doctor? Friends?" The captain shoved him through the doorway, the lab tech slipping on the fluids and glass, cutting his right hand with a wince. We flowed in. "Jesus," I said. "I've been all over. I've seen mass graves that terrorist cells have used in far-off countries, filled with entire villages worth of people. I've seen kill dens inside tunnel systems. But this, it surpasses all of that. Every horror, every war crime, multiple times over." A series of gigantic glass tubes aligned the walls made out of monitors, hard drives and computer systems. The path of carnage led through the pile of guards at the doorway. That makes 24 armed personnel that were taken out by something. What really bothered me was what was in those murky blue and green glass tubes. As big as a refrigerator, connected to a port on the bottom and top, tubes and wires inside connecting to... The captain shoved the lab tech into a glass tube. The pop of the man's nose echoed off the empty area as he grabbed his nose. "Well, Doc, which one was it? Which tube?" "Tube? What's he talking about? How does he know what was on that other frequency?" The lab tech spat out, blood leaking into his mouth. The captain, standing at 6'5", a giant even among his team full of brawny operators, picked him up by the collar of his blue undershirt. "I don't..." Two weapon sergeants stepped out of the way as the captain got in his face, shoving him against the left side wall, causing the monitors and computer systems to beep and light up. "Oh, you don't know, and yet your little hand opens the room that you didn't have access to," he roared, abandoning all silence and discretion now as the man began to sputter and sob. "Please, please, I..." The captain gritted his teeth, quickly flipped up his nods and stared daggers into the man's soul. "How many people have you snatched off that trail? How many? What kinds of butchering did you do to those kids before you stuck them in there? Which one escaped?" Kids? Butchering? Something in my mind stopped, and I switched on my rifle's tactical light. A heavy pit in my stomach formed as I flashed it on the tubes. There were people in those tubes, there were people. Wires and tubes now poked into see-through and murky flesh, as the bodies of the kidnapped floated, mutated, dissected and changed. One person's skin ran reptilian-like up their left arm before merging with a strange gaping hole in their chest, their skull protruding out of the skin in their head. My breathing stuttered a bit as I backed up a few steps, glass crunching under my boots. Curses were uttered by the others in the room as we all began to look. Another one's mouth was sealed at the front. Two more jagged, messed-up sets of teeth poked out on either side. Their eyes were sealed, skin covering defined eye sockets on their head. The medic flashed his light on one where the spine stuck out through their back, the vertebrae larger than a normal person's, the bones sticking out inches longer in some areas. "Jesus, man, this is..." He gagged a bit, coughing as he looked away. I had to pry my eyes away. My mind was frying just looking at it. "They better be dead." "Oh, I swear to the Lord himself if they aren't," the captain said sternly. The man sobbed and nodded. "Yes," the captain raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Yes, they died during surgery." "If you're lying to me, I swear to Christ, I'll make you euthanize every single one." The captain shoved the lab tech forward into the centre of the aisle. I looked down, shaking my head as the images of those things burned into my mind. "Where has she gone, Doctor?" the captain said sternly, squaring up to the man who sobbed as he shrugged. Where is it?" The man continued to cry. "It escaped. It killed everyone. It cut through the guards. It cut through everyone, all of my friends." This caused the captain to nearly bust a blood vessel from the look he gave him, balling up his fist and driving the armoured knuckle of his Oakley glove into the gut of the lab tech. This made the smaller, weaker lab tech buckle over, dropping to his hands and knees, now favouring an injured hand and bursting with pain. "Your friends? Your friends? You mean the friends who kidnapped a 22-year-old girl and a 14-year-old boy and turned them into monsters? What about them?" This earned only more sobs from the lab tech as the captain turned, hands on his hips, and scoffed. He looked at the medic, who only stared back through his nods. The captain turned to look at him. "You've got until the count of 10, and if you don't give me a single whereabouts of this thing, I'm going to start grabbing tools and cut your little weasel butt up like you all did to these kids." The captain loomed over the man, grabbing him by his hair. "Sir, please," the lab tech pleaded. 1, 2, 3, the captain counted. Some looked away and others shook their heads, not out of shame for our leader. There wasn't a man in the room who wouldn't do what he was doing right now after seeing them. It's in the woods. You heard it. It yelled like 10 minutes ago. The captain laughed, letting go of the man's hair as he whipped his head forward. You'll hear that? It's in the woods. He pulled out his M17, his 9mm sidearm, pulling the slide back a bit to make sure that it was chambered. 4, 5, 6. The man stood up, and at this point I kicked out his extended leg, dropping him back to his knees. The man looked at me, then at the captain. You can't do this. This is illegal. Before the captain could respond, we heard it. It echoed all the way down the facility halls, reverberating off the glass tubes in the room. That half-feminine, half-monstrous cry. Except this time it didn't come from the far-off mountains or trees. It came from up the stairwell, and then the lights went out. I don't know if it was prior damage to the facility, the electrical works, or something else, but the lights in the halls, the lights on the stairs, the lights in the room, the electronics, the lights in the tanks, they all went out. It cried out again, and this time I think I heard it say, "Help me." Anybody who had their nods up flicked them down, as all of us trained our lasers down the dark hall beyond the doors. The slight shakiness of all the green lasers told the same stories. All of the death, all of the... in the tanks, it had everybody spooked. The captain came up alongside me and the medic. He looked back at the lab tech. You run, you die. The man swallowed and smothered his misery. I know, the captain corrected him in a low tone. No, you really don't. The creature cried out again. Help me! The sounds of something hard impacting the tile floor echoed as it approached us through the dark. More footsteps, and then another cry. Help me! The gunner let out a shaky breath as he cracked his neck. More footsteps, and then another cry. Help me! Maybe 5 meters from the door now. Lord Almighty, the captain muttered. I couldn't see much in that darkness then, but I saw what everybody else saw. I saw enough. Its body was easily 6 feet tall, with 2 gigantic, bony, mantis-like legs that were dark from blood as it stepped into the doorway. Its head was smooth, its large teeth shining in the darkness, and its eyes glowed like an animal. Its eyes glowed. It could see us. We all froze. We had rifles trained on it, a machine gun trained on it, and a room full of Green Berets. I mean the best of the best, and everybody froze. The captain was the first to fire, slamming his trigger as he shot a .223 round into that abomination. The gunner opened up with his weapon, followed by the medic and 2 more weapon sergeants. It yelled at us, cried out like an agonized woman pleading for help, and then it lunged, running and slamming through a test tube. Glass flew everywhere, causing several of us to shield our faces as the water flooded the floor, and the deformed body inside flopped down near our feet. A horrendous, rotted smell filled the air. Jesus, the medic sputtered, gagging a bit as he kicked it away. The creature now screamed as a rifleman nearby jumped back. It leapt on top of him, shoving its bony mandible into his left shoulder, pinning him to the ground as he screamed, thrashing his elbow into the thing and kicking its stomach. But it didn't attack him. It just eyed the scientist. He attempted to run for his life, but the creature jumped on top of him, pinning him face first into the murky floor. That's when I noticed the 6 smaller human-like arms on its torso. Its main mandible pinned him down while the arms, some normal, some with bony spikes for fingers, others lined with sharp teeth, began to rip into the man's back. The lab tech screamed, his lab coat torn open as it dug into his back. Some continued to fire shots, but the creature didn't even react, just continued to tear into that vile, poor soul. The captain's voice lit up the comms as he and the medic rushed to pick the rifleman up and heave him onto the captain's shoulders. We can't engage it here. Outside, now. He was right. It thrived in close quarters, running guys through before they could pick it apart. We all ran, nerves shot, weapons hot from firing into a creature that didn't react, the power off so that we couldn't close those blast doors. All we could do was run. I nearly slipped on the glass as we made our escape, firing desperate pot shots into the lab with the gunner. The lab tech's screams echoed throughout the hallway as we raced up the stairs. It would be done with him soon. The gunner and I covered the captain as we broke out into the open air, the smell of rot and death replaced by the fresh, piney air of the forest. Several men broke out road flares, tossing them everywhere, giving us much-needed light in greens, blues, reds and purples. The captain dropped the man behind a beaten-up wrecked sedan as the medic began to patch him up. The gunner deployed his bipod and aimed at the facility doors from the car's hood. The captain positioned different men where they could all fire on the door, far enough away from the creature's grasp. "Romero, get on that net and call in the air." The comm sergeant began to work behind the sedan. I took aim behind a large SUV with several others, and we all aimed at the door. The screaming stopped. The silence was broken by the sound of its bony mandibles as it rushed into the open air. With all the flares, chem lights, and even the captain's tack light, we finally got a good look. Its skin was a mix of pink from exposed muscle to a see-through clear layer covering other parts. Bony calcium-like armour had formed over much of its body, including its back and legs, creating smaller mantis-like features. Its head, an exposed skull, had all too human eyes peering out in rage as its larger, unhinged jaw opened and it roared its deafening cry at us. The gunner was the first to open up. The blast of a 5.56 tore through the armour on its mandible, legs and torso. The creature recoiled at first and then charged forward. The captain ran from his position in front of the sedan. The creature drove its two large mandibles into the roof, badly denting it. The medic quickly covered the wounded weapon sergeant, shielding him as the creature peered down at them. The captain drew its attention, aiming fire at the back of its head. It roared with a vengeance as it charged at the captain. He fell back to the sedan, running out of our line of fire as the creature barreled toward us. It drove a mandible into the hood, impaling it, and then another just to my left. I circled around behind it and fired. It cried out, blood pouring from its wounds as its calcium plating cracked and fell off in chunks. The creature turned toward me, and as I flicked my M4 to auto and laid into it, it barreled at me, shoving me to the ground. Its smaller, demonic hands reached for me as I kicked them away. Its jaw snapped as I held my rifle in the way, the metal of the rifle getting chewed on. The gunner then blasted a chunk of its exposed skull away, staggering it. The captain whipped his stock into the creature's head and then backpedaled as he fired off another burst of the rounds. The creature turned on him, roaring viciously. The captain dropped his empty mag and slapped in a fresh one as the creature lunged at him, both mandibles raised. The glass exploded out of the SUV windows as the captain dropped to a lower level, firing into its stomach as he circled back into the open. The creature roared as it tried to move for him again, but it couldn't. Its large mandibles were stuck all the way inside the vehicle. The captain left his rifle slung on his front and reached for something in his kit, an M67 fragmentation grenade. "Get back!" Everyone who was in the open ducked for cover. The gunner and several weapon sergeants retreated behind a series of concrete jersey barriers. I ran and slid behind the sedan, helping the medic shield our wounded battle buddy. I heard the distinct sound of the spoon flying and the whistling of the grenade. The captain vaulted over the car hood with the comm sergeant, covering his radio operator's head as they both went prone. The explosion was thunderous. The shock wave of the grenade shook everyone and rattled me a bit from being so close. Shrapnel and fragments flew everywhere, impacting the concrete barriers and the building. Any windows on the sedan that weren't already broken were shattered. A few seconds passed as we all hesitantly started to lift our heads, then dropped them as the SUV's gas tank seemingly erupted, detonating and engulfing the wreck in a fireball so large that I felt like the flames were touching my face. The captain popped up, aiming from the top of the hood of the car. Then I and several others joined him, peeking from behind our cover as we looked to see if that had done it. The SUV was a burning skeleton, an inferno from all the ignited gasoline covering the frame, the ground around it, and the beast as it defiantly pulled its remaining mandible, its front left one being the only appendage it had left, and stumbled out from the flames. Its skin popped, its muscles boiled, and with all of its see-through skin and bone plating torn and burned off, it gazed around, its eyes ruptured and melted. "Help me," it groaned. The gravel crunched as its charred and still burning body slumped forward. The captain emerged from behind the SUV as only a few of us dared to approach the thing. He lifted his nods at this point, his M7 back up and aiming at the thing's head. 3 shots to the thing's head caved in the damaged and charred skull. A circle of light illuminated us as the rotary blades of the Blackhawk sounded overhead. I shielded my face and lifted my nods to avoid the spotlight blinding me. Up 4 actual, down, building secure. The ensuing hour was shrouded in, I don't know, mystery, I guess. The captain went against prior missions of telling us to go prone and pull security, putting the gunner at the sedan by the gate and telling the rest of us to watch the wood line. When the vans showed up, that's when he told us to chill out, and they really weren't vans, they were more like armoured trucks. Not for the sake of being classified and remaining anonymous, I can't divulge a lot about them. I'm definitely not saying the black shirts were wearing black multicam combat uniforms with kits, weapons and gear that would definitely mark them as a private sector group. I'm not saying their uniforms were sterilised with all patches, logos and markers stripped. I'm also not saying that the hazmat suits looked far beyond anything that our MOP system has. I'm not saying they brought several metal KPEs in from their armoured vehicles, and I'm not saying they brought an advanced surveillance drone with them. I will say that they weren't really hostile. I mean, heck, one even offered us a cigarette. The bird landed at the opposite side of the building, in the open lot where they eventually told us to head, and we prepared our guy for Casevac on a litter with the Black Hawk. As the captain finished talking to some guy in a suit, much shorter, maybe 5'8", he bore the look of a younger but still weathered man, his hair slicked back with a hard part. A slight bump underneath his sports coat suggested he was armed. The captain eventually joined us. As soon as the aviation crew shut the door, he popped his helmet off, much to their anger, and stomped back to his seat. When we touched base and got back to the COP, our sister Team Artemis replaced us on QRF. But I've been thinking about that stuff for days now, about what those people did to them in that lab. What the captain said. They kidnapped them, cut them up, changed them all for what? Some sick fantasy? Who even owned that lab? There were no US markings and no logos. Zip. Like I said before, there's still a lot that I don't know. But what I do know is that those people got exactly what they deserved. That thing crying out for help, pleading for us to end its suffering. The more I think about it, the more it makes me sick. I don't know who those guys were that relieved us. They didn't have any markings. Some of them spoke German, if my memory serves. But whoever they were, I hope they learned from their mistakes and never tamper with that evil stuff again. Hey friends, thank you for listening to today's story. Make sure to click the notification icon to stay updated on all future narrations. I release new videos twice every day at 10 AM and 8 PM Eastern Time. If you have a story to share, please send it to the email displayed on the screen. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like and leave an encouraging comment. It really helps me keep bringing you more narrations like this. If you'd like to support the channel even more, you can get early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.